Hey guys, how are you today? Quick rant before we dive into today's chaos. As some of you might have noticed, YouTube's algorithm has decided I'm not special anymore. Shocking, I know. So now if you don't like, comment, or do a little backflip in the algorithm's honor, this video might just vanish into the void, never to be seen again. Seriously though, even a hi or "this is wild" in the comments helps way more than you think. It tells YouTube, hey, people actually like this channel. Maybe don't hide it from everyone. That can really help push my videos out to a wider audience, not just to my subscribers. So if you enjoy these stories and want to support the channel, that's the best way to do it. Now grab a drink, get comfy, and enjoy the drama. You won't want to miss this one. My mother-in-law has never really liked me. One of the biggest reasons for this, I believe, is that I come from a different country, and my background is nothing like my husband's. Our cultures, traditions, and even the way we were raised are very different. And I think that's something she has struggled to accept. My husband and I first met when we were working at the same company. From the moment we crossed paths, there was a strong attraction between us. Even though I felt the same connection he did, I was hesitant to take things further. A big part of me worried about what his family would think, especially since I already had a feeling that they might not approve of me. I tried to resist the idea of us officially dating, not because I didn't have feelings for him, but because I was afraid of the challenges that might come with it. However, my husband was always certain that we belonged together. He reassured me over and over again that his family's opinions wouldn't change the way he felt about me. He promised that no matter what, he would stand by my side and support me. Over the years, my husband has stayed true to his word. He has always stood by my side, just like he promised he would. Winning over his family wasn't easy, and it took time for them to truly accept me. In the beginning, there was some hesitation, but as they got to know me better, they started to see me for who I really am rather than just an outsider. Eventually, they gave us their blessing, and things became easier with most of them. Unfortunately, the one person who has never come around is my mother-in-law. She has never let go of the idea that my husband has somehow betrayed her by choosing me. In her mind, he should have married someone she approved of, someone she thought was more suitable for him. She has even told him outright that he could have done much better if only he had listened to her. No matter how much I have tried to change her opinion, it has never worked. I have gone out of my way to be kind, respectful, and patient with her, hoping that over time she would warm up to me. But no matter what I do, it seems like she has already made up her mind about me. Since I come from a poor family, she assumes the worst about me. In her eyes, I only married her son for financial security. It doesn't matter to her that I've worked hard my entire life or that I make my own money. She refuses to believe that my intentions were ever genuine. What she doesn't understand is that despite our struggles, my parents did everything they possibly could to ensure that I had the tools to succeed. They may not have been wealthy, but they gave me everything that they could, and I owe them for that. Since moving to this country, I've worked hard to build a life for myself. One of my proudest accomplishments has been helping my siblings relocate here so that they too can have better opportunities. My parents, however, have chosen to stay in our home country, and I fully respect their decision. Because of everything they have done for me, I make sure to send them money every month from my own earnings, not out of obligation, but because I want to take care of them just the way they took care of me. My husband and I both work hard and earn almost the same amount. We share financial responsibilities equally, contributing to household expenses and our mortgage together. We also have a joint account that we specifically use for our children's needs, ensuring that we both play an active role in providing for them. Despite the fact that I contribute just as much as my husband does, my mother-in-law has never shown me even a shred of respect. None of my contributions seemed to matter to her. In the early years, she didn't even try to hide her feelings from me. She would be openly hostile toward me, making rude and hurtful comments whenever she got the chance. It wasn't just subtle digs or passive-aggressive remarks. She made it very clear that she disapproved of me. Her words stung, and no matter how much I tried to brush them off, they always left me feeling small and pathetic. My husband, to his credit, has never let her get away with it. Every time she has tried to disrespect me, he has stood up for me without hesitation. He always calls her out on her behavior, which often leads to heated arguments between them. He has never once wavered in his support for me. Eventually, my mother-in-law seemed to realize that her comments only created more conflict with her own son, so she stopped being so direct. She has learned to keep her mouth shut, at least on the surface. But even though she no longer voices her disapproval as openly as before, her attitude toward me has never changed. The coldness in her eyes, the way she avoids engaging with me unless absolutely necessary, and the general sense of disdain she carries. It's all still there, just beneath the surface. She has learned to hide it well. Even on what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of our lives, our wedding day, my mother-in-law made it painfully clear just how much she despised me as her daughter-in-law. She refused to attend the ceremony, choosing instead to make a public spectacle of her disapproval. While we were celebrating our love and commitment to each other, she was on social media writing cruel and hateful things about me. She called me a greedy, manipulative woman who had stolen her son and forced him into marriage. It was as if she wanted the whole world to believe that I had somehow tricked him into being with me, rather than accepting the simple truth that he had chosen me because he loved me. Her words hurt not just me, but also my husband, our family, and our friends. Everyone was upset by what she had done, and after a lot of arguments, they eventually convinced her to take the post down. But by then, the damage had already been done. Those words, that public humiliation, still haunt me. It was at that moment that I finally realized I could never truly respect her ever again. No matter how much time has passed, I still resent her for how she has treated me in the past. The only reason she continues to remain a part of our lives is because of our children. As much as I would love to shut her out completely, I can't justify cutting my kids off from their grandmother. It wouldn't be fair to them. They deserve to have a relationship with their grandmother, no matter how I feel about her. So, for their sake, we maintain a connection with her, but it is purely for them. There is no real relationship between us beyond that. I keep my guard up knowing that she will never truly accept me, and I have learned not to expect anything different. Now coming to the latest situation. Recently, my mother-in-law and Phil invited all of us over for lunch. My sister-in-law and her husband were also there with their children. It seemed like a normal family gathering at first, with everyone chatting and catching up. But then in the middle of the meal, my mother-in-law suddenly announced that she had something special to share with everyone. We all turned our attention to her as she stood up from her chair, clearly excited to make her big announcement. She went on to tell us that she and my father-in-law had finally decided to fulfill a lifelong wish they always had. They were going to sell most of their belongings and use that money along with their retirement savings to travel full-time in their minivan. It had always been a dream of theirs to hit the road and explore the world. And now that they were at a stage in life where they could finally do it, they had decided to just go for it. We were all genuinely happy for mother-in-law and Phil. It sounded like an incredible adventure, and we were glad they were finally getting the chance to experience it. But then my mother-in-law went on to announce that she had decided what would happen to their family home and vacation house while they were gone. She declared in front of everyone that both these properties would be going to my sister-in-law and her kids. The entire room fell silent. My husband froze, completely caught off guard. My father-in-law and sister-in-law both looked at her just as confused as we were. But my mother-in-law, unfazed by anyone's reactions, continued speaking as if this had been the obvious choice all along. She explained that since she and my father-in-law would be traveling full-time, they no longer needed an entire house for themselves. Instead of selling it or dividing it fairly, she had decided that only my sister-in-law and her husband should move in and have the house for themselves and for their children. My sister-in-law's face lit up with excitement. She and her husband immediately started thanking my mother-in-law profusely for her generosity, acting as though they had just won the lottery. Meanwhile, my husband and I sat there in complete shock. My mother-in-law didn't even acknowledge us, acting as if my husband and our children didn't even exist. Then, to make things worse, she told my sister-in-law with a warm smile that she wanted her and her kids to always have everything because they were her real family and deserved her true family blessing. I was taken aback by how dismissive she sounded. It wasn't just about the house, it was the message behind it. She was making it clear in front of everyone that, in her eyes, my husband and our children were not part of that family blessing. It was like my husband was not her real family or something. I turned to look at my husband, and I could tell right away that he was feeling some type of way. He wasn't saying anything, but his silence spoke volumes. I knew him well enough to recognize that deep down this hurt him. And honestly, I couldn't blame him. For some context, my husband has done a lot for his parents over the years. When they wanted to buy their vacation house, he helped them out financially. He gave them thousands of dollars, never once expecting them to pay him back. On top of that, he's helped his father in countless other ways, buying him a new car, covering major repair costs for the family house, and stepping in whenever they needed any financial support. His parents have never hesitated to ask him for money over the years, and he has always given it to them without a second thought. But despite all of that, when it came to something as big as deciding what would happen to the family properties, my mother-in-law didn't even consider him. She didn't acknowledge his contributions, his generosity, or even the fact that he had played a direct role in helping them afford these things in the first place. Instead, she handed everything over to my sister-in-law, like it was a done deal. Now, my sister-in-law has always been my mother-in-law's golden child. She is the daughter who can do no wrong in her eyes. But the reality is, she and my husband couldn't be more different. While my husband has worked hard and has always been willing to help others, my sister-in-law has spent her entire life relying on her parents for support. She dropped out of college and has never had a job, not even for a day. She went straight from living under her parents' roof to moving in with her husband, never once needing to stand on her own 2 feet. Even when she and her husband bought their house, they had to borrow money from multiple family members just to afford it. Unlike my husband, she has never helped their parents financially or in any other meaningful way. And yet here she was, being handed both the family home and the vacation house, like it was her birthright. As if things couldn't get any worse, my mother-in-law also informed my sister-in-law casually that she could probably sell the vacation house in the future if it got too difficult to maintain and use the money for her kids. She said it so nonchalantly, like she wasn't stripping my husband of something that he had financially contributed to. Like she wasn't completely disregarding the fact that he also had children who were just as much a part of the family. At that moment, it became painfully clear in my mother-in-law's eyes. Only one of her children mattered, and it wasn't my husband. This is when my husband finally decided to speak up. He turned to my mother-in-law and in a calm but firm voice asked her if she truly believed this was fair. He reminded her that he had helped them financially over the years, especially with the vacation house, and that he had always supported them whenever they needed it. He wasn't demanding anything. He just wanted to understand why she had made this decision to give everything to his sister without even discussing it with him. My mother-in-law barely blinked. She simply shrugged and said that my sister-in-law was more deserving of the inheritance. She went on to explain that my husband and I were doing well for ourselves because he has ended up marrying a modern woman instead of a traditional one, just like she had always wanted him to. This is why, in her opinion, she preferred that her daughter, who was a stay-at-home mother, deserved the house more than us because she and her husband were struggling more and could use the added financial help for their kids. My husband's jaw tightened, and I could tell he was holding back his frustration. At this point, my father-in-law, who had been mostly silent until now, finally spoke up. He looked confused and asked my mother-in-law when they had decided all this. Because, as far as he knew, they had never actually discussed giving everything to my sister-in-law. It was clear from his tone that this wasn't a joint decision. It was something my mother-in-law had unilaterally decided on her own and went on to announce in front of everyone. My sister-in-law, however, wasn't about to give up. Instead of acknowledging my husband's valid concerns, she supported mother-in-law's decision, saying that she and her family did deserve the houses more than us because they had more children and bigger financial burdens. She acted as if my husband and I had never struggled, as if we hadn't worked hard for everything we had. I could see the hurt on my husband's face. He has always known that his mother somewhat favors his sister over me, but this was so blatantly obvious. His contributions, his sacrifices, and even the simple fact that he was her son didn't seem to matter. Seeing him so defeated made my blood boil. I wasn't expecting a handout from my in-laws, but I also wasn't expecting them to completely disregard my husband like this. He wasn't asking them for everything. He just wanted to be treated like an equal member of the family. But my mother-in-law had made it clear. In her eyes, only one of her children deserved anything, and it wasn't him. My husband took a deep breath, his face unreadable, And then in the calmest voice he could manage, he politely thanked my in-laws for the lunch without saying anything else. There was no anger in his tone, no outburst, just quiet restraint. He then simply pushed his chair back and stood up. Then, without another word, he turned to me and gave me a small nod, silently, letting me know that it was time to leave. I understood immediately. Without hesitation, I stood up as well, gathering our things and motioning for the kids to follow. They didn't fully understand what had just happened, but they could sense the tension in the air. My mother-in-law barely acknowledged us as we left, still basking in my sister-in-law's gratitude. My sister-in-law, on the other hand, was too busy celebrating to care that her brother, the very person who had always been there for their parents, was walking out of that house deeply hurt by what had just transpired. The drive home was quiet. My husband kept his eyes on the road, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. He didn't say much, but I could see just how upset he was. Throughout the drive back home, I didn't push him to talk. Instead, I just sat beside him, letting him process everything in his own time. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words, and in that moment, I knew he needed space more than anything else. Ever since then, my husband hasn't spoken a word for hours. I want to comfort him, to tell him that he has every right to feel hurt. But I also know that this is something he has to come to terms with on his own. To make it worse, he has also been receiving voicemails and texts from his sister. Over and over again, she has been calling him greedy and selfish for even questioning their mother's decision. She has accused him of causing unnecessary issues and stirring up drama over something that, in her eyes, wasn't even up for debate. She is acting as if he is the villain for even daring to express his feelings, as if his years of support and sacrifices for their parents means nothing. So, Reddit is my husband an a-hole for feeling upset over his mother's decision. Update 1. First of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone who took the time to read my post, offer advice, and send kind words of support. Honestly, I wasn't expecting such an overwhelming response from this community, but reading through all your comments has made me feel less alone in this situation. It means a lot to know that so many of you understand where my husband and I are coming from, and I truly appreciate all the encouragement. I also wanted to take a moment to clarify a few things since I noticed some common questions and assumptions in the comments. Why didn't my Phil stop my mother's-in-law announcement? My Phil seemed just as blindsided as we were. From his reaction at the lunch, it was clear that he had no idea my mother-in-law had already decided to give everything to my sister-in-law. He even asked her when they had made this decision, which pretty much confirmed that mother-in-law had acted on her own. The truth is, my Phil is a very passive person. He doesn't like conflict, and over the years I've noticed that he mostly just goes along with whatever mother-in-law wants. I don't know if he'll speak up about this later, but I'm not holding my breath. Did my husband ever ask for the houses or expect an inheritance? No, my husband has never once asked for anything. What upset him wasn't about getting the houses. It was about the complete disregard for his contributions and the way he was treated as if he wasn't even part of the family. He has given his parents so much help over the years, both financially and emotionally. And to have his mother act like none of it mattered, that was the real betrayal. It's not about the money or the property. It's about the message behind her decision to give everything to his sister and her kids only. Why did mother-in-law do this? Honestly, I think it comes down to favoritism. Mother-in-law has always favored my sister-in-law to the point where she doesn't even try to hide it. In her eyes, sister-in-law can do no wrong, and my husband will always be second best. This was just another way of reinforcing that belief. It didn't matter how much my husband helped their family. Mother-in-law had already made up her mind about who deserved everything. On top of this, mother-in-law has always disliked me. So, I can't help but feel that she takes some of that anger out on my husband as well. This is why she doesn't want our children to have any of the inheritance. What's going to happen now? Right now, my husband is still processing everything. He hasn't spoken much about it, and I'm giving him space to deal with it in his own way. He hasn't responded to sisters-in-law voicemails, and I don't think he plans to at this point. I think he's realizing that no matter how much he gives and gives, mother-in-law will never truly appreciate him the way she does sister-in-law. As painful as that is, I think it's also bringing him some clarity on where he actually stands with his family. Again, thank you all for your support and for validating what we're feeling. I'll update if anything major happens. Update 2. It's been a few weeks since the last incident. My husband hasn't reached out to his mother or sister. And aside from a few guilt-tripping messages from sister-in-law, things have been quiet. That was until a few days ago when Phil called my husband and asked him to come over for a family meeting. At first, we weren't going to go. My husband didn't want to deal with more drama, and I certainly didn't want to sit through another situation where mother-in-law or sister-in-law tried to paint my husband as the villain. But Phil insisted. He said it was important and that he needed us to be there. Reluctantly, we agreed. When we arrived, mother-in-law, Phil, and sister-in-law were already seated, waiting for us. The tension in the room was thick. Mother-in-law was looking smug, while sister-in-law barely acknowledged us. Phil, on the other hand, seemed more serious than I had ever seen him. Once we sat down, Phil cleared his throat and got straight to the point. He said that ever since mother-in-law announcement at the last family lunch, he had been thinking a lot about it. He admitted that he felt blindsided by mother-in-law decision, and after reflecting on everything, he realized how completely unfair it was for his wife to do something like that. He then turned to mother-in-law and said, "These houses belong to me. You had no right to just give them away like that." Mother-in-law face-palmed, and sister-in-law's smug expression vanished in an instant. Then, in front of everyone, Phil pulled out a folder, took out some documents, and handed them directly to my husband. At first, my husband hesitated, unsure of what was happening. But Phil looked him in the eye and said, "Our family vacation house is all yours." Phil had officially signed over the deeds of the house to my husband. Mother-in-law gasped. Sister's-in-law jaw dropped. Phil went on to explain that after thinking long and hard about it, he had realized just how much my husband had helped him and mother-in-law financially for years, especially when they were buying the vacation house. Phil felt that it was only right to acknowledge his contributions. He then announced that sister-in-law could have their family home for her kids, but the vacation house would go to my husband and me. Mother-in-law immediately tried to protest. She argued how this wasn't her plan, how sister-in-law needed both the houses more, and how this wasn't fair to her. But Phil wasn't having it. He shut her down instantly, telling her that this wasn't just her decision to make, and that he wasn't going to allow her to completely disregard their son. Sister-in-law looked like she was about to explode. She tried to argue with her father, insisting that his decision was completely unfair to her and her children. She went on about how she had been looking forward to having both houses since mother-in-law had promised them to her already, and now that dream had been ripped away from her. She turned to mother-in-law for support, but there was nothing that both of them could do since Phil seemed resolute. My husband, meanwhile, was speechless with gratitude. For the first time, someone in his family had actually stood up for him. He quietly thanked his father, still processing everything while I squeezed his hand in support. After that, we didn't stick around much longer. Mother-in-law was fuming and still looked like she was ready to throw a tantrum. But honestly, we didn't care. We left that house feeling lighter than we had in weeks. My husband finally got the recognition he deserved, not just for his financial help, but for the years of being overlooked and treated as if he didn't matter. Ever since then, my husband and I have been planning how to make the most of the vacation house and explore ways to use it as a source of secondary income. Update 3. It's not even been 2 weeks since my last update. And just when I thought that everything was over, mother-in-law and sister-in-law ambushed us at home. I say ambushed because they didn't call ahead or check if we were available. They just showed up at our doorstep unannounced, ringing our doorbell multiple times and demanding to be let in. The moment we let them in, mother-in-law started off by telling me and my husband that she and sister-in-law had been thinking things over and wanted to have a mature discussion with us about the vacation house. That was already a red flag to me, but my husband let her continue. Mother-in-law then went on to suggest that my husband should either give the vacation house back to Phil, or at the very least let my sister-in-law and her family have the vacation house every summer rentrée. Sister-in-law, of course, jumped in, claiming that her kids had always loved visiting the vacation house, and it was unfair of us to just hoard the house all to ourselves. My husband stayed calm and simply told them that the house now belonged to him, and they had no right to ask him to let anyone stay there rentrée. He also informed them that he and I had planned to set it up as an Airbnb and use the extra income for our family's expenses. That's when all hell broke loose. Mother-in-law and sister-in-law immediately started yelling about how self-serving he was to even think about doing this, accusing him of destroying the family inheritance by letting strangers stay there. They acted like he was committing some horrible crime by choosing to do something practical with his own property. Mother-in-law kept going on and on about how this is why she didn't want him to have the house, and how the house was meant to stay in the family for personal use, not to be rented out to strangers. At one point, mother-in-law even asked if it was my idea to list the vacation house on Airbnb and scoffed, saying how money-hungry I was for trying to profit off her family's property. She insisted that I was manipulating my husband into making a decision that went against what she and sister-in-law wanted. My husband, still calm, explained to them that they had no basis to blame me when it was all his plan originally. He also pointed out that he had already discussed this with Phil regarding this, and he had no issues with it. My husband reminded them that at the end of the day, the house was now officially his, and they had no right to dictate what he and I wanted to do with it. But mother-in-law wasn't having it. She kept arguing, kept insulting him, and that's when I snapped. I had been sitting there biting my tongue, trying to be patient, but enough was enough. I exploded in anger and told both of them off. I reminded mother-in-law that she had already tried to screw my husband over, and now that her plan had backfired, she was trying to manipulate him into giving it all away. I told sister-in-law that she had never contributed a dime to her parents. Yet somehow, she felt entitled to everything like a child, and that we were done with her constant demands. And finally, I made it very clear that if this was how they were going to treat us, barging into our home, disrespecting us, and trying to guilt-trip my husband, then they were no longer welcome here. They were shocked. I don't think they expected me to finally put my foot down, but I was done playing nice. Mother-in-law sputtered something about how I was turning her son against his family, and sister-in-law commented about how we were being unfair to her and her children. They both turned to my husband for support, but he wasn't having any of it. Instead, he firmly told them to leave our house. Mother-in-law and sister-in-law huffed and puffed, but eventually stormed out of our house angrily. Ever since then, we haven't heard from them, and honestly, I hope it stays that way. My husband, for the first time in a long time, actually seems relieved to be rid of them. We're finally drawing some boundaries, and if mother-in-law and sister-in-law can't respect them, then they don't get to be part of our lives. Simple as that. Not the a-hole, OP's husband finally saw the truth. This was never about the houses. It was about OP's mill publicly confirming what she's always felt. OP's husband and their kids don't count. She was perfectly fine taking his money for years, then tried to erase him from the real family in front of everyone. I'm glad father-in-law finally grew a spine and did the right thing. Turning the vacation house into an income source is smart, and 100% OP's right. They don't get to call OP greedy while demanding free property and rent-free summer holidays. And now let's hear community's opinion. Not the a-hole. Your SIL is not entitled. She's delusional. She's never worked, never helped her parents, needed loans from everyone to buy her own house, and still thinks she deserves both houses, plus free summers in the vacation home? That's not just entitlement. That's Fantasyland entitlement. And the way she kept blowing up your husband's phone, calling him greedy after everything he's done for their parents. Girl, no. She thought she hit the jackpot and is furious the ATM finally shut down. Block her and enjoy your peace. Not the a-hole, but I'm actually impressed with your FL. So many posts like this end with the passive parent shrugging and letting the golden child get everything. Your FL got blindsided, sat with it, and then publicly corrected it in front of everyone and backed it up with paperwork. That's huge. He not only acknowledged your husband's contributions, but also showed your MIL that she doesn't get to unilaterally rewrite reality. If anything, your husband needed that moment to finally see who is really in his corner. Protect that relationship with FIL. He's the only reasonable one there.